Draymond Green, thank you for the never-ending content that you're providing for individuals like myself and Larry Krueger, who cover the Golden State Warriors. We're going to talk about what he said, which has been a lot, including his future as the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. Let's break it all down next with Larry Krueger. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. It's where we're exclusively live. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can follow the man. They're not booing. They're Krueger, baby. You can follow him on Twitter at Sports Larry K. You can subscribe to his ever popular, I think it's safe to say the most popular Bay Area sports program in the Bay Area. What's your sub count now for the Krueg Show, Larry? Where are we at?
I think today, actually, we will eclipse 43,000.
Jesus Christ. And every time I talk to you, that number is going up and up. I cannot express how happy I am for you, man. One of the good guys in this world is actually winning. You don't hear that every day. Follow Larry Krueger again on Twitter at Sports Larry K. Subscribe to his program, The Krueg Show. Larry, how the hell are you doing, man? I know you cover the Niners, Giants, but your first impression of the Warriors, how the season ended, and what are you looking forward to this offseason? How the hell are you?
I'm doing great, Cy. Good to see you, man. I'm super intrigued by, these things that don't seem like they're going to jive together, which is Joe Lacob saying they're Warriors and are light years ahead of everybody else and that they will find a way to compete. And yet, history tells us that's not the case. Most dynasties do not, go. Only the Spurs went from Duncan to Robinson, and they made so many good moves there between Ginobili and Parker and Kawhi. And, it's like it took a lot for the Spurs to keep their dynasty going. And I've looked at every possible angle on how the Warriors can improve via the draft, via trades. And there's no chance in hell that they're going to compete for a title next year. It's an impossibility. They would have to have some crazy series of events occur because I'm watching Minnesota, I'm watching Dallas, I'm watching these teams, Indiana, Boston. They're not on that level. They're not even close to that level. And I don't know what the solution is. I don't want to move Kuminga. I don't want to move Trace Jackson Davis. I don't want to move Pajemski. I'm not a huge fan of moving Moody. Those are the only young pieces that they have that are movable. Nobody wants anybody else on this team. They want to go to the finish line with Steph Curry. They want to go to the finish line with Draymond. I fear they're going to bring Klay Thompson back at way, way, way too much money. But then if you let him go, there's no way for them to utilize that salary slot. So I don't know what the best move is. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Dunleavy had a very good first year where he found TJD at 57 and he found Pajemski at 19. That was almost a miracle work when you really think about the rest of the draft and how it went for the other teams. So I have enthusiasm for Dunleavy's capability as a general manager. And I think this is a great era to draft low in. The Warriors do a pick in the 50s in round 2. I did see a mock draft the other day that had Baylor Shireman, who's one of my favorite guys in the draft, going like 55. But then I watched the Chicago pre-draft camp from start to finish, and there's no way Baylor Shireman's going 55. I mean, he's 6'7". He's a 2 guard. He's one of the great pure shooters that we've seen come into the league. He's probably going to go in the 20s at the end of round 1. So they can forget about Shireman, even though NBADraft.net's got him going 55 or whatever. The Warriors are going to have to literally every year there's like 1 or 2 players that kind of fall through the cracks. And for whatever reason, they wind up in the back half of the second round, or they don't get drafted and they wind up having NBA careers. And Golden State literally is going to have to find that diamond in the rough, that needle in the haystack, to have a chance to compete for even the top 5 spots in the West. Because otherwise, I just don't see it happening. And it's depressing to me, because I'm looking at them going, well, they've always had something. They've always had either assets they could trade, draft picks, lottery picks, players. Now they've got like 4 core young players and some fading stars, and like one guy, Wiggins, in the prime of his career. And nobody seems like they want him. So it's like, good luck. I think Joe is totally kidding himself if he thinks that they're light years ahead of everybody and they're going to find a way to build this awesome team out of what they have. If they can do it, I'll tip my cap to them, but I just don't believe they can do it.
I want to start before. I mean, you unloaded a lot there. And I agree with you in terms of first of all, the Warriors don't even have a first round pick. The only pick they're going to have is going to be somewhere in the 50s, I believe. And I think it's Charlotte's pick. We could talk about that in a little bit. I wanted to pick your brain, though. There was this soundbite that I feel like went completely under the radar last week. I don't know if you had a chance to talk about it on your show. I don't know if you even heard this clip, but it's Steve Kerr. And this clip is going to lead to Draymond Green conversation, because Draymond just yesterday or the day before on John Wall's podcast talked about a conversation he had with Joe Lacob about his future with the organization when his playing career is over, and the topic of him taking over as head coach came up. That's a fascinating soundbite in and of itself. But first, I want to share, I played this a few days ago, but I haven't really had a chance to bounce this off someone else, especially someone with your acumen, your knowledge. So take a listen. Everyone else, please indulge me and watch or listen to this again. This was Raj Mathai. Larry, you and I know Raj because he started in sports many, many years ago before becoming KNTV's primary news anchor. But Raj sat down with Steve Kerr, and I've never seen Steve Kerr this forthright about his future with the Golden State Warriors. Here's the clip.
At what point do you think it's time to move on? Have you had those conversations with your wife? And surely they're private, but what point will you say, you know what, there's other things out there for me?
I think I will feel that, and the Warriors will feel that. I think we both considered that possibility this past year. It's been 10 years now. And, there's, I think, definitely in every job in sports, almost a shelf life and for a coach. And I think I will feel it when that comes. And I did not feel it this past year in terms of, it's time to leave. I feel like we've got a couple of years here with Steph, Draymond, hopefully Clay. We're still going. We're also bringing on a whole group of young players who are doing really well. I'm loving my job every day. I love coming into this building every day. What's not to love about the Bay? So I can't wait for next season with the Warriors. But there's going to come a time, and maybe it's in 2 years when my contract's up. Maybe that's the time where it's time for me to move on and time for the Warriors to seek new blood and new ideas. And we'll both know when that time comes. And I can tell you one thing, it will be a very amicable parting of the ways whenever that happens.
I'm going to stop it there because it goes another 2 minutes, but few bombshells to me. First of all, the fact that I don't think this was ever reported. I never heard this, that Kerr and Lacob actually talked about the end of his tenure as head coach last year. I mean, it was no secret, but I feel like this program and coming on your show were the only times that the fact that Steve Kerr was a lame duck coach was not reported on enough. And clearly from what he just said, there was a reason for that. The end might have been last season, but he got the 2-year extension. I love the fact that he is confident in believing that the end is going to be amicable. Steve, unless Joe Lacob told you that directly, I don't know how the hell he knows that. I thought that was wild. Your thoughts, Larry?
Well, I mean, was the Myers departure amicable? I mean, you could argue it was. You could argue it wasn't. Is it going to be that level of amicable? I believe that. I don't believe Steve's going to, be crying and mad, and I mean, I don't think it's going to get emotional and ugly on the way out the door. Yeah, I won't go. You have to go. It's these things. Everybody's a big boy, and was the Myers parting amicable? I mean, if you listen to the press conference, it sure seemed amicable to me. But if you dig a little deeper and talk to people in the know, then it was not only not amicable, that it was he was basically fired.
Yeah.
And so, Kerr's a very good coach. He's a very good coach. And he's a very capable person. He's built a career out of being in the right place at the right time.
Big
And
time,
he's
dude.
smart enough
Big
to put it. He's smart enough to place himself. The Bulls got him right. He didn't get the Bulls. How did the Bulls? Did the Bulls draft him, or did they?
I thought he was a free. No, I'm gonna look that up real fast. I thought he was a free agent acquisition, but I could
Okay,
be
so
mistaken on that. Let me look
okay,
that
well
up.
then maybe he placed himself with the Bulls, but he definitely placed himself with the Spurs.
Yes,
So and he didn't never started. So it's not like he won the rings as a player because of him. He won the rings even though he hit a big shot in one of those finals that iced it. But he didn't. They didn't win because of him. They won and he was there.
correct.
So
And just to add
and
to that,
then
Larry, real fast, he was drafted by the Phoenix Suns in '88 with the number 50 pick in the second round. Left there after a year, played for the Cavaliers for a few years, played for Orlando for a year, traded. He was traded in both those situations, and then signed in '93, right after Jordan retired the first time, with the Bulls as a free agent. So just to clarify what happened there. Go on, sorry.
okay. So I mean, he placed himself with the Bulls, won rings. Placed himself with the Spurs, won rings. Placed himself with the Warriors, won rings. Um, I think he's a good coach who's been in the right place at the right time and has tons of rings. Now, is he like 10 times the coach? I mean, we live in a very bottom line oriented society where
Correct.
scoreboard. So what? Are you telling me that Steve Kerr's a better coach than Don Nelson? I don't think so. I think Don Nelson was probably a better coach than Steve Kerr. But Steve Kerr's got rings everywhere. He's got rings and then, more rings. And Nelly's got none.
Right.
But did Nelly ever have the best team? No. So I think Kerr's a good coach. I think he's a great guy. I love talking to him. I think he's really smart. I think he could do any number of things and be very, very capable. And I think he's a good coach who has got great ability to place himself in the right situations at the right time.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's going to lead into, because again, the way that sounds, it's very possible when this 2-year contract is up. Hell, it might be possible end of this coming year that the Steve Kerr era is over. I agree with you that he's a good coach. I will leave it there. To me, there's a difference between good or even very good and great. He's going to certainly get into the Hall of Fame as a head coach, but I think you were completely accurate in what you just said, which is that Steve Kerr has been blessed with timing. I mean, timing is so much in this world, and he's always been at the right place at the right time.
Well, he's put himself there too. I mean, he could have gone to the Knicks, but he didn't.
That's
He
true.
went to the
That's true.
Warriors. If he went to the Knicks, he would have been fired. I mean,
That's true.
and it's like, I'm not saying anything that's controversial. I've talked to Steve
Yeah.
about this. Steve has said that. He's like, if I went to the Knicks, I would have been fired. So, I'm just uttering things that I've heard Steve say about his, decision making. So he made a great decision to come to the Warriors. No doubt. And he is I hope people don't hear this and think that I'm trying to put Steve down. I'm not saying that Steve's not a very good coach. He's a very good coach, but the rings have to do with the placement of where that very good coach was as a player and as a coach at the right time. It's all about timing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's the greatest coach of all time, but I think he's a really good communicator. And I think if you say, what is Steve Kerr really good at? I think he's really good at keeping the media, making the media feel like they're part of it, but keeping them at an arm's length. And then he's really good at bringing the group together. I don't think that, in keeping the group together. And outside of maybe last year, I think the Warriors have always been together. I think you could make an argument that last ring that they got was just, kind of like a war of attrition, and they stayed together while all these other teams kind of fractured along the way. And then they were standing in the winner's circle at the end. Were they far and away the best team in the NBA when they beat Boston and won their last ring? No, but they were the best team standing at the end. Partly, I think it was one of Kerr's great coaching jobs, because lots of teams fracture over the course. The season goes from September to 4th of July almost, and that's just a long time to be together. It's a small traveling party. These teams are made up of 12 to 15 players and maybe 10 other coaches, a few other staff. I mean, that's a pretty small group of people that's traveling the country, playing in all these games. And it's just lots of teams fracture. We saw it with the Suns. We saw it with the Clippers. We saw it with, and he has found a way to avoid that fracture. And I think it resulted in a championship.
Yeah. When we come back, we're going to play Draymond's comments. He was on John Wall's show, and he revealed a very interesting conversation that he reportedly had with Joe Lacob, the owner of the Warriors, regarding his future once his playing career is over. So we'll talk about that and so much more with the greatness that is Larry Krueger. First up, though, let's give some love to our first sponsor for the day, and that is Game Time, which is all about getting you tickets for the events you want to go to. Larry, is there anything this summer that you and the family are going to be doing that you've that involves an event, a concert, a sporting event, a theater production, anything like that that requires tickets?
No, nothing that I can think of, though. I'm kind of a little bit of an Old Dominion fan, and I saw that they're going to be up in Santa Rosa, so I may want to go try to check out Old Dominion.
That is random, dude. That is about as random as it gets. That's a private college here in the Bay Area. Do they have a sporting? They have an athletic department? I didn't even know that.
No, I'm not talking about I'm talking about Old Dominion, the band.
Oh, I apologize. Okay, there we go. Okay, I was like, yeah, there's a school here in the Bay Area called Old Dominion, but I didn't know that. Oh, gotcha. Okay, so no,
you're thinking of Dominican College. I think there is an Old Dominion college, but it's in Virginia, I believe.
Okay, I thought maybe there was one here too, but you might be right. Well, regardless, summers are all about events. People love going to concerts, baseball games, whatever it is. The best resource for tickets is Game Time, for the simple reason they got tickets last minute. You don't have to worry about your spontaneity being a punitive thing because tickets have sold out. You can get great views for your seats just by looking at their app or their website. And the best part is a low price guarantee. If you buy your tickets from Game Time and you see the same tickets in the same row and section from another broker, they'll match the difference plus an extra 10%. That's literally a low price guarantee. So if you want tickets, check out Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. That's what my copy says here, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, excuse me, and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON NHL, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Are you tired of all that shouting and screaming that goes on with the programs on Fox Sports and ESPN? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can follow the man, the myth, the legend himself. They're not booing, they're Kruegan on Twitter at SportsLarryK. Larry Krueger's program, The Krueg Show, is available on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Larry, let's hear from Draymond Green. He was on with John Wall. I don't know if Wall is still playing in the NBA or not, but regardless, he's got a podcast like everyone else. Draymond was a guest on the show, and the topic turned to a conversation he had recently with Joe Lacob, the owner. And the discussion was about potentially taking over as head coach. Interesting content. Let's hear from Draymond.
Honored, man, and with the conversations that I've had with Joe Lacob over the years, and him saying to me, like, yo, when you're done, I could see you one day coaching this team when Steve's done. Like, I could see you working with this team. Like, I would love to see that. That means the world to me, because that means the man that owned the organization that I play for is watching me play basketball and saying, this guy can one day coach my team. Like, man, this again, big business. These assets are not small, man. Like, if you're gonna trust somebody to coach your team, that's not small. That's not a small thing. That's a big fucking deal. And so to know that you have that type of support, and like the owner of the organization that I play for is watching me and saying he can one day coach this. Or, man, Steve Kerr is my coach. Like, the guy who's been coaching this organization for the last 11 years, 12, 10 years is Steve Kerr. He's a Hall of Fame coach. You're watching him and saying, I think that can one day be Draymond. That's insanity to me. And so I'm very thankful that people look at me in that light. But as I am in year 12 of my career, I say right now, and everything changes as time goes on, so I would never say never. But where I stand right now in year 12 of my career, headed into year 13, I'm not sure I want to be on a basketball schedule.
And Larry, when we come back, I want to get your reaction to that. Got to give some love to other sponsors real fast here to catch up with the clock. But again, interesting stuff. And the idea of Draymond Green as head coach of the Warriors is tantalizing. It's certainly fascinating. So we'll get into that. I want to hear your reaction, Larry, if you don't mind, after we give some love to our second sponsor of the day, and that is valuable resource, societally, individually, however this applies to you. I do not believe that mental health deserves a stigma. And this is the most important organ in your brain. If you need help, go get it. Could be trivial things that at least might be trivial to most people, but could be serious to you. Could be major things, whatever it is. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba and get on your way to being your best self. And one of the best parts about BetterHelp, from my perspective, is the fact that whether there's a stigma or not, you don't have to worry about driving to an office. You don't have to worry about changing your clothes. BetterHelp offers the resource of mental health services from the comfort of your home. You don't have to, you literally just open your computer and you speak to the therapist virtually and you get the help you need right there. And one of the many issues that people have brought up about mental health services is the fact that maybe you don't connect with your therapist. Maybe your therapist just doesn't feel like a good fit for you. You can cycle through therapists. Keep going through it until you find the right match. And there's nothing wrong with seeking help. It's a good thing, folks. And BetterHelp is a resource for you. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp. BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on NBA.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. For the everydayers, follow me on Threads at Dog Wild for updates on the program, and make sure you follow Larry Krueger on Twitter at SportsLarryK. Subscribe to the Krueg Show on YouTube as well. Larry, Draymond Green as head coach of the Golden State Warriors, your thoughts?
I mean, why not? I mean, who coaches basketball teams?
Right.
Basketball players,
Right.
He's a basketball player. Why would it be that surprising that he would be a coach? I mean, he's a genius basketball player. The question is he hasn't been able at times when the spot gets hot to control his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you going to be a leader of a group if you can't control your emotions? But as far as his basketball intellect and his ability to motivate people and his interpersonal skills, I don't just think he would be a good coach. I think he could potentially be a great coach. I think if the real power spot, though, is not coaching. Coaching is, you're getting your hands dirty. You're on late night flights. You're grinding through morning walkthroughs. The real good job is the general manager job,
Mm-hmm.
or be like Michael, or be an owner. If I was Draymond Green, I'd want to be a part owner, or I'd want to be the general manager. I don't want to mess around on the coaches get fired. Coaches, it's a players league. It's a, if you don't have the players, you're not good. We just talked about how Kerr placed himself in all these great situations. If Kerr's, going to go to the Hall of Fame, and yet if he had placed himself with the Knicks, he would have been fired. So, Draymond Green, be careful what you wish for. It's like, oh, you might want to be the coach of the Warriors. What if you're the coach of the Warriors in this like 5 to 7 year down cycle that inevitably is coming their way? Then suddenly, you're going to be fired and you're going to be scapegoated. So I don't know. I mean, there's no doubt that he could do it. I heard him last night on TNT. Those guys are yucking it up, and he's trying to get serious and talk real basketball. And and it's like almost like he's talking over Kenny and Shaq and Charles's head. It's like Ernie. It's like they had Kyrie up there. It's like Draymond's making real basketball points that are almost like esoteric insider type things that are probably, that's probably he's probably going too deep for the TNT audience, to be honest. But he's a basketball genius. So I think he could do it. I think the smarter role for him would be the general manager, because I think he's also shown an ability and a desire to, to look at prospects and, what's more valuable, the guy who can be like Jerry West and, find great players in the second round, and, the guy who can find the Draymond Greens and the Monte Ellises and the Gilbert Arenases in the second round, and TJD deep in the second round, or some motivator. I mean, at the end of the day, you could be freaking the greatest motivational speaker of all time. If you don't have players in the NBA, you're not winning jack. So
Absolutely
I don't know. I personally think if I was him, it could be an honor to be the coach, but I think it would be a greater honor to be the general manager and the architect.
Absolutely right. And as we're learning constantly, the GM has considerable more power. The GM is also, for the most part, constantly looking out to cover his own ass, for the simple reason that constantly head coaches are scapegoats. I mean, we just saw the head coach of the Cavaliers got fired. I think this was this morning or late yesterday. The news was announced. We see head coaches get fired all the time as a means for a GM to pass the blame to someone else, right? Eventually, you get exposed as a GM, but they have added power in that regard. Want to quickly add some context as well, going back a moment to Steve Kerr. In case people aren't familiar, Steve Kerr was set to become the head coach of the New York Knicks. This was when Phil Jackson had taken over as team president, and Phil had recruited Steve Kerr personally. Steve Kerr was all set to be the head coach of the Knicks, but then the Mark Jackson firing happened. All of a sudden, the Warriors had an opening, and the Warriors wanted Steve Kerr. And kudos to Steve Kerr for asking Phil Jackson for his blessing to change his mind, and Phil gave it to him, thankfully. So I just want to provide some context there. You brought up Mike Dunleavy Jr. last year as a GM, and I'm curious to know if you really think his first year on the job was a success. I have no doubt in my mind, and I don't disagree with you at all, that the draft was successful. I mean, Brandon Pajemski, first team, all rookie. Trace Jackson Davis clearly belongs. Should have been starting games sooner, or at least playing sooner. In all honesty, it's Steve Kerr's decision not to play him until as late as he did might have cost them a spot on the second team, all NBA rookie team. Sorry to be redundant there. But they also didn't make any moves besides that. The Chris Paul decision, I mean, I think it's safe to say it was a money-saving choice, but that didn't pan out. He's turning 39. The dude's 6 feet tall. I don't know who expected him to magically replace Jordan Poole's offensive production. But they also didn't make any midseason trades. And as we've seen, two of the four teams in the conference finals have benefited from midseason trades. The Mavericks, Gafford and Washington, those are huge moves. You look at the Pacers, Pascal Siakam. The Warriors thought sitting back and doing nothing was the right decision, and it bit him in the ass. So given the fact that the team has done nothing from a personnel decision outside of the draft, what are your thoughts on Mike Dunleavy Jr.'s first year?
I mean, I'm impressed. I mean, he obviously worked a backroom deal with the agent to get Trace Jackson Davis passed over by about 20 teams. And they took the right guy in Pajemski, though a lot of people thought they should have gone with Cam Whitmore or something like that, who went next.
Well, at the time, I thought it was weird that Ken Whitmore had fell as far as he did, but yeah, the Potts
But he
pick was
also had,
clearly right.
you know, supposedly he showed up at a lot of the workouts disinterested, looking at his watch. You know, there were people that were saying that he wasn't impressive in the meetings. So, I mean, Pajemski has obviously got, you know, a lot of talent, and he made the all rookie first team. And Trace Jackson Davis is even a better pick than Pajemski. So, I mean, I like the job that he did. I don't think, you know, I'm not going to fault him for the midseason. We have to figure out what the plan is. I mean, it's like Joe is billed as this guy who I'll spend every nickel, but you didn't
Not true.
trade Klay Thompson you telling me that nobody was going to take Klay Thompson at the trade deadline, and now what? So it's like, why didn't you move Klay Thompson? And is it because you're going to let him walk and you're going to let that salary space, use that thing up and basically just, it's all for cap purposes? They traded Poole for Paul. My thought on that was, kind of like the Durant thing with D'Lo. All right, we'll really know more about this move after we see what they get for D'Lo. Well, they moved D'Lo, they got Kuminga, they got Wiggins, they won a title, and then that Durant move looks genius by Myers. Well, if this, you're trading a 23-year-old for a 38-year-old, and it looks bad on paper, but then you look at those contracts and you say, well, maybe the 30-year-old's contract would be easier to move. So if they move Chris Paul's contract and get another asset, then I like what they did. But if they just allow Paul to walk away as a free agent, and this is all about clearing cap for Joe and saving bucks,
which it is.
I mean, you can't be the guy who spends every nickel if you're looking for, ways to avoid spending money. And that's, to me, until proven otherwise, the Poole thing was about Joe saving money, and the Klay non-trade in the midseason was about Joe saving money. And what's the motivation? I mean, what are you trying to do? I understand the NBA salary cap rules. I understand the new CBA is really punitive. I understand that it's almost like they made the rules to defeat the Warriors. But to just be straight with everybody and say, hey, look, we view cap compliance and staying under the second apron as vitally important to maintaining, good decision making going forward, and that's what we're doing. Instead, it's kind of like, I don't, they haven't really said what they're doing. It's like, and so you're looking at this from afar going, okay, you could have traded Klay Thompson and gotten assets. You didn't. Now, if he walks away in free agency, there's nobody that you can get to replace him and fill that salary slot. So then it's like your choices are sign a guy who's clearly past his prime, who's going to get worse and worse and worse, who's having a hard time coping with, late career decline. And you're going to either have to overpay him dramatically to make him happy, or you're going to have him on your team against, at some dramatic lower number that he's going to be, resentful of, or you're just going to let him walk and get nothing in return. And then you turn Poole, who was a key player, key cog on a team that won a championship, into 1 year of Chris Paul, only to let Paul walk for nothing and get nothing in return for Paul. So it's like, if you get nothing in return for Klay, nothing in return for Paul, how do you expect to get better?
And nothing for the James Wiseman pick, which was
that
was also
Wiseman
money,
pick, which was, Joe. That was clearly Joe.
And not to mention that trading him away for Gary Payton II, that was a money decision. Letting Gary Payton II walk was a money decision. You're absolutely right. Joe Lacob is not as freewheeling of a spender as the image that may be portrayed. Larry, we build this as a two-parter. Check your email. Your link's coming in just a second. We got to do a separate show for part 2. There's a lot to discuss, and I can't thank you enough for doing 2 parts with me. I know you got a busy schedule. We'll run through the second part really fast, but there's a lot to talk about because Draymond said a lot of other things. People are talking about James Wiseman coming back to the Warriors. I actually don't hate that idea.
Why?
Because as a backup big on a vet minimum deal, because he's going to be a free agent most likely. He knows the system. Could be a reclamation project. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that in part 2. So we'll be right back. So if you subscribe to Locked On Warriors, Part 2 is coming right now. Just go to the channel page. Join us for that. We'll have a lot more in just a moment. Until then, in about a minute or so,